So in my previous video, I went over a pretty massive new addition coming with 12.0.5 of Midnight, this being the Voidforge, which is going to be a pretty massive shakeup in how you can go about gearing in Season 1 of Midnight. And now we've even gotten some additional information from Blizzard to where this system is going to get even crazier, because now this system is also going to tie directly into the Great Vault, which can allow you to use the Voidforge even more. Now, if you want to learn all of the intricacies of the Voidforge and the two different gearing systems that are tied into it, I'd recommend checking out my previous video, but just to give you a TLDR of the system as fast as I can, which is still probably going to be pretty long, the Voidforge is essentially just unlocked through some pretty easy quests, and once you've unlocked it, you'll then be able to buy nebulous void cores from an NPC. You can buy it for gold, veteran crest, or voidlight marl. You can get 2 a week, and these are bonus roll tokens that are a much more juiced up version of what we got in older expansions, where you go complete a piece of content or defeat a specific boss and you can use a bonus roll token to get an additional piece of loot. Except back then you would just have a chance to get a piece of loot. With these nebulous void cores, you will always get a piece of loot. You can get 2 of them a week, and they can be used on all endgame PvE content, so Nightmare Prey runs, Bountiful Delves, Mythic Plus runs, or raid bosses. And they have some pretty interesting intricacies within them, like if you're specifically using these in Mythic Plus runs, the bonus loot you get from using one of these will be the item track and item level of the Great Vault you would normally get from that run. So if you use one of these nebulous void cores at the end of a plus 10 Mythic Plus run, you will get a myth track piece of gear. So outside of this just being more loot, you can also get higher track loot specifically for Mythic Plus that you can never get in a run before. Now, another one of the big intricacies is that when you use one of these tokens on whatever content you're doing, whatever piece of loot you get will be removed from the loot table of that content. So if you go defeat a specific heroic boss from one of the raids and you use one of these void cores on that, whatever piece of loot you get from that will be removed from the loot table of that specific boss on that specific difficulty. This also works in, say, Mythic Plus runs. If you go and do a specific Mythic Plus dungeon and you say get the trinket you're looking for out of it, it will remove that trinket from the loot table, which will just allow you to target specific items much more easily than we've ever been able to in pretty much the entirety of the game's history. And the second gearing system tied into the Voidforge are Ascendant Void Cores, and these will also be unlocked from another quest line. These are directly tied into the Voidforge as well. And once you've done that quest line and you go complete any endgame content, which includes PvE or PvP, you will then start to get these fragments of Ascended Void Cores. Once you've collected enough, you turn it into an Ascended Void Core, and you can use it on heroic gear, myth track gear, or high eye level crafted gear, and you can upgrade it past the item level we can currently get. Now, it requires that gear already be fully upgraded in its track, then you can upgrade it past that point, but this will allow you to upgrade gear further than you can right now, and this will only be available for weapons and trinkets, which are your most valuable pieces anyway. So for instance, if you fully upgrade a mythic track piece of gear and then use an Ascendant Void Core on it, it goes up to 298 item level, which is pretty ridiculous. So this will give you some pretty massive power increases. So there are multiple gearing systems tied into the Voidforge, a thing to give you more gear and even give you higher track gear that you couldn't get before, and then a thing to upgrade those higher tracks of gear past what you can normally do. And there is a lot more intricacies with this system, so I'd recommend checking out my previous video if you want all of the very minute details of the system. But we've recently gotten additional information from Blizzard that will allow you to get even more nebulous void cores to get more bonus loot. And specifically, you'll be able to get 3 a week now, because the third one you can get is from your Great Vault. So if you go and open your Great Vault for the week and it doesn't have an item you want, you can instead choose what's usually the pity roll, which are the tokens of merit, and we've had these ever since Great Vaults have been in the game, where you can get these tokens and you can go use them at a vendor. You can usually just get things like crest, some gold, or the one that most people use it on is you can get an item to allow you to add a socket to specific gear pieces. So if you just got nothing that's good for you, you can get that, or if you can't really get any upgrades from the vault, people would also end up choosing that to be able to add more sockets to their gear. But instead of those few options, you can now take those 6 tokens of merit that you would take as a pity roll, and you can buy an additional nebulous void core. Now this can actually be better than choosing gear from your Great Vault because of how these nebulous void cores work. Because as I mentioned, you'll be able to get 2 of these per week, and if you use these on a specific piece of content, it removes the loot you get from them out of the loot pool. So I think the easiest example to give is from a Mythic Plus run. Let's say you're doing Algathar Academy and you're looking for the puzzle box trinket, which is best in slot for like most of the classes in the game. And let's say you've been spam running it and you just can't get the trinket to drop, or you just can't get the trinket out of the Great Vault to get a myth version. Because as of right now, before 12.0.5, you actually can't get any of the dungeon loot as myth track unless it comes from your Great Vault. So a best in slot trinket like this, you couldn't get on myth track unless you get lucky and get it from your Great Vault at the end of the week. Well, after 12.0.5 and after you pick up your nebulous void cores, you can now go run a 10 or above Algathar Academy, and at the end you can use one of these nebulous void cores to get a random piece of loot for your spec from the dungeon loot table, and whatever piece of loot you get after you use the void core will then be removed from the loot table. So let's say you get super unlucky when using these void cores and you use your 2 void cores you can get per week and you don't get your trinket. Well, first off, both of the items you did get are now removed from the loot table, so every single void core you use just massively increases the chance of you getting the item you actually want. Second, as I mentioned, these items will be on the myth track, which is kind of unique to Mythic Plus, that you now can get higher pieces of gear than you can normally get from the content itself. But because you can now also take these tokens of merit that you could choose to get from the Great Vault, you can now also get a third one of these void cores and also use that on that dungeon. So you're just whittling down the loot to get the item you're actually looking for. And even though Mythic Plus dungeons are the full loot from every boss of that dungeon that you could use in that pool, if you just choose the tokens of merit and have 3 of these rolls for that dungeon per week, you will very quickly whittle down the loot you could actually be getting from that dungeon. And not only are you whittling it down to get the items you want, but again, if you're doing a 10 plus Mythic Plus dungeon, all of that loot will be myth track. So it's even more valuable than just getting loot from that dungeon itself. So just picking these tokens can actually be more valuable than picking up an item from your vault. Obviously, if it's a super good item from your vault, like if you could just pick up a myth track puzzle box out of your vault, you're probably still going to want to do that. If there's not something that's super high value for you to get from the vault, these tokens of merit are actually a very good thing to pick up, and I don't think will feel nearly as bad as not getting a really good item from your vault. So it's another guaranteed piece of myth track if you're somebody that does Mythic Plus. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.